still a few more joining us, but yeah, let's get started. Cybersecurity standards for the public sector, or which one? And this, of course, is based on the emergence a few years ago that there's a cybersecurity baseline standard for the public sector. And when I dived deep into it, I recognized a lot of language from other standards. Indeed, they seem to align with the NIST, but go beyond that. So today we're going to look at several standards, because your question might be, well, which one should we implement, and is it enough to do the public sector baseline standard? So we're going to look at four. These are the four most common we come across. There are others. The 27001, which was updated in October 2022. The NIST standard, that's the American one, and that has gone from version 1.1 up to 2. Also quite recently, that was in February this year. We're going to look at the also at the Public Sector Cybersecurity Baseline Standard, which has been out a couple of years, and within, yeah, maybe somebody can tell me the exact date. I was unable to find it out, but I think either the end of this year, around October, November, or next year, you will need to comply if you're in the public sector. Cyber Essentials, if you are in the UK, you certainly know this. If you're doing business in the UK, you will know this. It's kind of a requirement if you want to bid for any tenders. And that has gone through a couple of changes. So we look at them all individually, and then I have one slide at the end with my Venn diagram to see if I can explain, well, what I think are the differences and what you need to do. Okay. As always, I have a quote on my third slide. This one from Buster Posey, an American baseball player, who said, "You should shoot for high standards and believe they are obtainable." I think it's just about an attitude, you know, that always aim for an A, aim to be the best, and believe it is obtainable. Certainly, I think there's nothing in any of these standards that is off the scales. I think it's all certainly desirable and achievable. Okay. Some new faces among you today. So a word about us in calQrisk, the company, and also the product. We see ourselves as, like many of you, risk and compliance professionals, and we're members of various institutes and organizations like the Institute of Risk Management, Bankers, Compliance Ireland, etc., to try and keep our skills as sharp as yours so that we can engage with you and talk about solutions for governance, risk, and compliance. We supply a software in the cloud, can be in-house as well. And we also offer a risk advisory service if you need help in setting up your risk management framework, and maybe it's training, maybe it's just risk alignment. We have a software, as I said, that's been out now about 10 years, and increasingly we've added functionality over the 10 years and added customers, many in the financial services space, but also many in the not-for-profit and public sector, county councils, city councils, and such like. And they all, the common thing is they're using the tool to gather the information about risk and compliance. Okay, and reporting it, obviously. So if we start with the 27001, and I have a similar format for each of these, and hopefully give you an overview and help you decide, well, do we need one or two, or, you know, what's the best? ISO, the International Standards Organization, 27001, been around for, I'm going to say 20 years now, since about 2003, took over from the 17799 Information Security Standard. It's been a good standard. Long delay between the previous version, previous full review in 2013 to 2022. And you know what? I think they've just tinkered with it, but we'll have a look at that. I think the marketing people had a hand in giving it a name: information security, cybersecurity, privacy protection, and then information security management system. Now, what that tells you is this is a management system standard. So it has a structure that you'll find in ISO 9001, in 14001, in 45001 in any of the management system standards. Now that usually means, because it's a requirements document, lots of shalls, lots of things you must do if you're to be certified against it. To my mind, cybersecurity is part of information security, and privacy protection goes beyond just information security. I personally wouldn't describe this as privacy protection complete. It's part of it. You need good information security to do privacy protection. Okay, so who's it for? Well, if I was to put it in a word, I would say it's for the IT. It's for the people who understand this stuff, because it's languages is technical for the most part. So it's for the Chief Information Security Officer, the risk analysts, again, the security risk analysts, information security consultants, and certainly risk managers who have to cover this area. But it does require a certain level of technical understanding, I would say. The structure, as I said, it's aligned with the ISO management system standard structure, Annex SL, it's referred to. And that means that those standards, any standard that's a management system standard, will have these sections. The context of the organization, where you describe your organization, your objectives and your vision and your mission and all of that, because this gives the information security context. I mean, you're managing information security in the context of what the organization is seeking to achieve. So that's the starting point. You know, I've seen it in previous one, understand the organization. And it's important that that's your starting point, that, you know, you're not trying to, what is it, drain the ocean. You're trying to, you know, support the organization in achieving its objectives, if your job is to make sure the information security is good. Starts with leadership, I think, always. Any initiative, any standard, any objective, leadership have to show the way, have to say, this is what we want to achieve. This is how, this is who. And then you do the plan, do, check, act, like in most management systems. The planning, the support, the operation, putting it in practice, checking if it's working, and then correcting the bits that aren't working or improving it. All of these sections are in every standard, whether it's 9001 or 14001. And the logic behind that is that if you have a management system, and every organization has a management system, not necessarily aligned with ISO, but if you implement one standard and you want to implement another, then it makes it easier to aggregate the requirements, if you wish, into, because it's the same headings. The essence really of the standard is contained in the annex, which is the information security controls reference. And just to give you an example here, what it looks like, section 5, classification of information. Information shall be classified according to the information security needs of the organization. Now, the shall is, you must do this. It is a requirement. What I miss in this standard that was in the previous version is control objectives. In the previous version, those of you who know it, it started off with an objective. You know, what are you seeking to achieve? And here are controls that will help you achieve that objective. Now, I think something is lost when they took out that control objective, personally speaking, but that's me. So what is new? What has changed if you knew this before? Well, on first passing, it looks like they've reduced the number of controls from 114 to 93. But in reality, they've just merged those controls into, maybe you can call it a higher level control, but they're all in there. They haven't really lost any, to be honest. And they've added 11 new controls. We'll have a look at them in a moment. Removed 3, they say. So yeah, they did remove 3 and renamed 23. The interesting bit is the 11 new ones, because the rest hasn't really changed. Moved around a bit on the deck, but hasn't really changed. What they've also done is they've changed the grouping of the controls from what was referred to as 14 domains into now 4 themes. This is good because I think it brings better focus. You've got people, and there's 8 controls in that. Organizational, 37 controls. Technological, as you would expect, and 34. And then physical. And I've seen a slight increase in the focus on physical controls as well, but 14 physical controls. So let's have a look at the new controls, because kind of instructive as to way things have gone in the last 5 years in particular. Threat intelligence. You should be collecting threat intelligence. What does that mean? You should have your ears open, listening to what's happening, listening to the advice of whether it's your information security advisor, or whether it's Gartner, whether it's Microsoft, or whether it's Verizon, wherever you get your intelligence. Be aware of what's happening so that you're not surprised, so you take action early. So gather that intelligence, analyze it, and take action. What we've seen over the last 10 years is a greater move, particularly with COVID as well, to use of services in the cloud. I think for the first time, they've included a control that you need to have processes and controls if you're going to be providing services or buying services that are provided in the cloud. You would imagine that readiness for business continuity would have been there already, but no, this is a new control that you should have business continuity plans and test them. Untested plans aren't really worth an awful lot, to be honest. Physical security monitoring. Now, I think the physical security was always there, and the only difference I saw was this continuously monitoring. The word continuously, that was the only addition I saw. Configuration management. You would imagine configuration management was there a long time ago. Well, it was, but what I'm reading is more monitoring and reviewing, and not doing it once a year. We're probably doing it once a quarter. My words, not theirs. And then the other 6, information deletion. Again, you would imagine that would have been there, but basically that you delete it when it's no longer required. And I think this is kind of reflecting GDPR and saying you only keep information as long as necessary. This is bringing it into a control within the IT environment as well, that when it's no longer necessary, delete it. Don't be just keeping it just in case. Data masking. Masking, that's encrypting sensitive data, whether it's in transit, at rest, or in use, that even when somebody who has access rights down at the database level, they can't read it because it's encrypted. Masking on screens as well. Data leakage preventing. Do things to stop people stealing your data, stealing maybe data about your customers. Monitoring activities. And I think it's an ongoing problem that you don't know if the bad guys are in your systems because they're quietly stealing the data, that data leakage. So we need better tools to detect the anomalous behavior. If you're all of a sudden talking to a server in Hong Kong or St. Petersburg, maybe that's not you, maybe it's somebody in your system. So a bit more on that. Web filtering, having deny lists. We can't say blacklists and whitelists anymore. It's allow lists and deny lists. And secure coding. Again, this is, you would imagine that if you're doing software development, there's a whole other standard that we should comply with. But this is at least recognizing that, but light enough. Okay. And so on to NIST. I'm going to try and get through all of these in the first 33 minutes. NIST is from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States. And this framework, cybersecurity framework, first came out for the national infrastructure, and the language was about infrastructure and protection. It was then extended, or I should say a version produced that could apply to more organizations. It's very popular, and you'll see why in a moment, the language. The previous version 1.1 had been around since 2018, and just recently in February, they brought out version 2. Version 2.0. We'll talk about that in a moment. So I would say it's for everybody. And whereas originally started maybe for government organizations and industry that was critical infrastructure, they've made this applicable to everybody. And not only that, I find the language is also accessible to non-technical people, and you'll see why. The structure, 6 functions, and you'll notice these are verbs: govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. I'm delighted to see the inclusion of a section on govern, because I've been talking about NIST for 3 or 4 years now, and I've always felt it was missing. Those of you who've seen earlier presentations, I've added it in. But the interesting thing is that the standard describes the outcomes. Unlike 27001, which describes the controls, the things you should do, NIST describes the outcomes that are desirable. I'll give you an example. At the function level, at the highest level, identify, it says the organization's current cybersecurity risks are understood. Now, you don't need to be a technical person to understand that sentence. Drill down into asset management, which is one of the categories under identify. And it says that assets, and that systems, facilities, services that enable the organization achieve its business purposes are identified, managed, consistent with the relative importance to the organizational objectives and organization's risk strategy. Another statement, another English sentence that we can all understand. And when you go down to the subcategory of asset management and say, well, what in detail? And this is throughout. I'm just giving one example. Inventories of software, services, and systems are managed by the organization and are maintained. These are outcome statements, and how you achieve them is up to you. Now, they do give guidance, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, what's new? This was, I think, a significant update to the NIST, and appropriate, and recognizing what's been happening in the last 5 years. They've added that one function, as I said. There's now 6 functions. There wasn't a total absence of governance, but they've moved the governance bits from the other areas into one. Makes sense. That fundamentally all of the other activities need to be, supported by good governance. If you don't have good governance, they just won't happen. 22 categories down from 23, not significant. 106 subcategories down from 108, not hugely significant. I think they've moved the stuff around to more logical grouping. But there are some things like greater emphasis on aligning and integrating cybersecurity with the business strategy. Certainly the business strategy should be dictating priorities in cybersecurity, not the other way around. Let the dog wag the tail. Managing third parties or the supply chain risk is, I think, elevated. There was always maybe alluded to, but now it's higher prominence. And I think that's because collectively, we are more dependent on third parties. So there's a requirement there to manage the third parties and the supply chain, and beyond the third party, the fourth parties as well. That's why they talk about supply chain rather than just third parties, because it's that chain. You don't know how many links you need to go back to be comfortable that you're managing the risks there. They don't try to tell you how to do everything, but they do in NIST. It does give you lots of references to other frameworks, like the Secure Software Development Framework. I think it would be too much to try and put into NIST, and in any case, you may not be developing software, so you may not need that detail. But good references. They've a good team together who've scoured what's available, and there's good links. Well worth going onto the website and checking it out. They've added implementation examples. Now, I know that the risk with getting examples like this is that people will take the examples and say, okay, that's what I have to do. Try not to do that. Try and take these as just examples. It's the outcome you want to achieve, and how you achieve it will be different, whether you're a county council or whether you're a harbour port or whether you're, a school. How you achieve them will be different. But they give examples, and that is useful. So that's the next level down, if you like, and I've just shown an example here. The The other thing I noticed is they added an improvement category under the identify function, but it just doesn't apply to just the identify function. It actually applies to all. Personally, I think it probably should have been in the governance function, but that'd be petty. As long as you have an improvement function, you're doing the plan, do, check, act. The act is the improvement, the continuous improvement. Okay, and now to the public sector. Now, I know we have a couple of people signed in coming from the UK, and some might be less interested in this, but this is the Public Sector Cybersecurity Baseline Standard, which originally came out in November 2021, was updated in November 2022, and has about 222 things that I've identified. I said things, controls. Some of them are expressed as outcomes. And it's interesting because I wasn't involved in it, but I am involved in standard development with ISO. And I can see that in the room, there were people who knew the NIST, there were people who knew 27001, there were people who knew the critical security controls, which is one we don't often see. It's more popular in the US. And there's a bit of everything in it. There's quite a lot, and it goes from the high level down to detail. So let's have a look. First of all, it's for all public service bodies in Ireland. It's saying you will comply with these requirements. And I think it's aimed at the ICT department. Certainly some of the requirements, I can't imagine the CEO equivalent in a government agency being able to explain what a DMARC record is, for example. Apologies if you're a CEO and you know what a DMARC record is. But it's aimed basically at the technical people, whereas I think NIST is accessible by anybody in the organization. Now, it's aligned with NIST from the point of view that they have 5 themes: the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And the observant among you will notice that that was NIST version 1.1. And if they want to continue the alignment, they'd have to add the governance one. But that's the nature of these things, that as soon as you align with one and somebody changes one part of it. So there are 5 themes using the same headings as in NIST, but you'll be wrong to think that it is just NIST with a bit more detail. No, they've had a bit of a free hand, and they have added stuff in, as we shall see. Under the identify, there's 9 subsections and 18 requirements. Under the protect, and this is interesting, the most requirements, and 14 subsections, 58 requirements. Detect 7, respond 7, and recover 14. And personally, I think a lot of this would have been driven by experiences and attacks that we've experienced, but they're all good. There's nothing in it that I would exclude, but it is a mix of high level and detail. So the 5 themes, 42 subsections, and 104 high level requirements or measures. But those 104 high level requirements, when you look at the detail, translates into about 222 requirements at the detail level. Now, they're shown as guidance notes, but the language tells me that it's a requirement, as in you must, because, for example, the cyber incident response plan will use commonly known processes, preparation, identification, containment, eradication. Now, that word will, I read somewhere else in it, is where you read will, read shall, which means must. So even though it's a guidance note, it's a must. Now, somebody who might read it might come up with a different number, but order of magnitude, there's 222 things that you could or should be doing. Now, 40 of these are specific to the public sector and do not appear elsewhere. And that's not surprising. Some are at the detail level, as I said here, and some are at high level. But the detail sometimes is very deep, like you shall apply DMARC to all incoming email. You shall use TLS protocol in all communications, that, you know, for encryption. So some of them are quite prescriptive, and some are at a high level. There is a good incident response checklist, and that is an important thing, that you do have a response plan, but it's a good plan checklist if you want to evaluate your plan against somebody's checklist. And there are lots of useful links to resources, because again, your organization is going to be different from the next public sector one, and you're going to have to do some things different. So good links to good resources. And the last one, and again, this is tipping the hat, as I would say, to my UK visitors today. Cyber Essentials, originally referred to Cyber Essentials scheme, brought up by the UK government to set I suppose, minimum requirements for anybody who wanted to bid for government tenders. I mean, it's been out 10 years now, so it is quite mature at version 3.1. Its focus is on IT infrastructure, and it's different from the others, different in that it goes deeper than most of the others in what the requirements are, but they're practical. There's nothing in it that you shouldn't do, I would put it like that. And it's not trying to be everything that NIST is, right? But it can be applied to any organization. Whether you're bidding for UK business or not, it's a good place to start. Get your infrastructure secure. And because of the title, it's Cyber Essentials, right? You can get an idea what it is. So it's a more narrow focus on the cyber side. It doesn't include business continuity. It doesn't include incident management. It doesn't include software development. It doesn't have a huge requirement for documenting policies. Those you'll have in management systems, and they're important to do as well. This is focusing on pragmatics at the infrastructure level. So they describe them as technical control themes. Firewalls, which I think we all understand, that the guardsman at the gate, keeping the bad guys out and stopping information leakage out of the company. Secure configuration, so when you put in a system that it's configured and hardened. Update management, all of these are common sense stuff. You would hope that every organization has it. Indeed, I think every organization should have the Cyber Essentials. User access control. This is covered in the others as well, fairly well. And malware protection. Malware is, I would say, the collective word for all of that stuff you don't want on your computer. And I like this because it looks for evidence of working controls. Whereas I often think with management system standards, there's often it's important, an emphasis on documentation. Now, when they come to audit you, the auditors will certainly look for evidence of working controls. I mean, that's what it's about. This is very much focused on that. So 5 technical control teams, 35 high-level requirements, and about 80 in detail. So it doesn't seem too bad, but remember, it's more the narrow focus. It's narrow and deep rather than wide and at a high level. You can do a self-certification by answering a questionnaire and get from somebody who will charge you money to answer their questionnaire and then give you a Cyber Essentials certification. But Cyber Essentials Plus is when then a consultant actually checks that you are and have those controls in place and they're working. This is, I would say, the minimum requirement, certainly if you're bidding for business in the UK. And they, like the others, there are toolkits available. If you wanted to go for certification, maybe you download the toolkit and do a self-assessment to make sure you're ready for that before you spend the money. So finally, to my last slide, when I started this off, I imagined Venn diagrams and how am I going to do this with 4? It's difficult. So I haven't tried to put the cyber over the public sector. And the numbers here are purely indicative, really, to give you an idea. So I'll start with the easy one, the Cyber Essentials. Yes, there's, I'm going to say 80 things you got to do, but in terms of the high level, there's probably just, they're going to share about 30 with the NIST in 27001. Because there's a lot in 27001 NIST that cyber isn't attempting to cover. Where it gets interesting is NIST has about 200 requirements in it. And you would think if the public sector standard is aligned with NIST, there must be good overlap. But I'm only showing here about 115 overlap. Indeed, I've added in our system, we put in questions so people can do an assessment, and I added 100 questions that we didn't have in the system before, and we already had 204 in for NIST. Now, some of those are fairly common, and probably we're going through a review of the NIST at the moment, and that'll probably end up having more questions that are common to the public sector. But there are, as I said, 40 certainly unique that you never find in NIST or 27001. And NIST is more high level, 27,000 is more low level. So yes, they do overlap a good bit. I would say most of the things that are in 27,001 you might think are in NIST, but not all. There are, I'm going to say, a dozen things in 27,001 that are not in NIST. There's more like 50 in NIST that are not in 27,001. So yeah, which standard? I would say, and most of you in the public sector today, because we aimed it at you guys, I would say you're picking certainly the public sector baseline standard and probably picking one other. And I think I'd be going for NIST for the most complete one. Depending on the size of your organization, you might start with Cyber Essentials. But Cyber Essentials won't give you enough in the public sector, but it'll certainly, I'd like to think that everything in Cyber Essentials is probably in the public sector one. Like I said, the Venn diagram doesn't work here for me, but down at that level of detail, because the public sector is a curious mix of that detail down at the DMARC records and DKIM records and SPF records and the high level. I think right on time on my 33 minutes. That was my intention to give us time. If there are questions, you can pop them into the chat. Don't know if I'd be able to answer them. I wouldn't put myself out as an expert here. We go through these standards because we codify them to put the questions in our software. And I do have a technical background, but I wouldn't be an expert. But if you do have a question, please do put it into chat or Q&A, whatever is handiest for you. And if you are going to ask, yes, this is being recorded and will be available, and the slides will be available as well. Paulina may contact you and send you that information. So, any questions, folks? No, you're all still there. Oh, we have one, two. Okay. Okay, where does NIST fit in with these standards? NIST is about national infrastructure, and not to be confused with NIST, which is the American one. NIST 2. Should we not be looking at NIST 2 and not NIST, as NIST 2 will be a EU requirement? Gavin, okay. NIST, anybody can look at NIST. It's for all organizations, public sector or not. If you're a public sector organization, you're probably looking at NIST 2 because the difference between NIST 1 and NIST 2 is that more organizations have been deemed critical infrastructure. Certainly you will know whether you have to comply with NIST 2, but I don't think it's a replacement for just cybersecurity. I think the detail is in a lot of the other standards. Do I need NIST? As a PSB in Ireland and ISO 27001 certified, do I need NIST 2? You don't. It's anonymous. If you have 27001, you're well on the way to, I would say, complying with the public sector baseline standard. You don't need both. If you've invested already in 27001, then I would say you focus on the public sector now to to pick up any of the bits that you haven't got already. I think NIST, if my audience was different, and in a few weeks we're going to do this similar again to a non-public sector audience, I think my answer would be different. For the non-public sector, I would look at NIST and be recommending it for a lot. Public sector, yeah, you got to comply with the public sector baseline standard and the NIST 2, most likely. They've extended the applicability to a lot more organizations. So certainly look at that, but it's not the same. I should probably put in a Venn diagram to show it, but it's not mutually exclusive. Cloud service aid management and compliance specifically for the PS. Anonymous attendee, the answer is yes. Will the calQrisk cloud service aid in management and compliance specifically for the public sector cybersecurity baseline standard? Absolutely, yes. All 222, which we've so far identified requirements, will be in the system shortly. Some of them are in. We're just doing a mapping exercise and putting in those that are missing at the moment, so that you'll be able to do, again, it's a self-assessment. Answer the questions and it'll give you a gap analysis. That's the objective. Okay. Maybe what I'm reading out is it might be worth sometime in the next few months, if there's interest, and please let me know, should we look at NIST 2 and the public sector baseline standard, and where there's overlap and where there's gaps, or indeed with the other standards, and see what are the bits that are outside of the cybersecurity standard. I mean, NIST talks about the supply chain, NIST, the NIST, and I would say at a light level, whereas NIST 2 would probably go deeper in that and greater requirements for understanding your third parties and your fourth parties. So I think there's certainly differences, certainly worth investigating that one. Okay. I'm not seeing any new questions, but thank you for those. I hope I've answered them. If there are questions that occur to you afterwards, you can always email me. I will do my best to, if I don't know it, I'll research it and give you an opinion at least. And if I don't know it, I'll tell you that. Sorry, another question. Is calQrisk on any of the OGP frameworks for IT consultancy services? No, we don't do IT consultancy services. We supply software to help you better manage your risk. Think of the software as a central repository of all that information, and with a reporting tool on it, a powerful reporting tool. We do risk advisory and helping people set up their risk framework, but we're not IT consultancy, no. Okay. Just checking that there's no other questions. All right, well, thank you for your questions, folks, and look forward to seeing you back at a future webinar from calQrisk. Keep an eye out on our website for events and webinars and our lunchtime learning.